If any of you took the 4 or 5 train to get here, you may have seen Danny Siciliano turning somersaults in the air while clinging to a pair of handlebars. Maybe you admired the virtuosity of his feet or worried about the lack of space between his sneakers and your face, or shrugged at the familiar spectacle of a hustle you've seen performed 100 times. The business of executing acrobatic tricks on a subway car hurtling through space has been around for a long time, and it's long had a polarizing effect on riders. But the ranks of supporters are thick enough that Danny, by his account, earns enough money from his performances to support his 3 children. According to him, he doesn't have many other options. He says the only other work available to someone of his skills and educational level is day labor, which pays about $80 a day, or $20 less than what he can make on the subway in half as many hours. When I asked what he'd most like to do for a living, he told me that he'd really like to work as a janitor. Danny's been at this for a decade, long enough to remember when the police generally left the dancers alone, but that changed about a year ago, he said, around the same time that a former transit cop named Bill Braden returned to One Police Plaza for his second stint at the helm of America's largest police force. Back in the 90s, Braden rose to the top post in the NYPD on the strength of his reputation as the head of a transit force that cracked down on fare beaters and garnered accolades for cleaning up the subways. A few months into his encore turn this year, he proudly announced that arrests of the subway acrobats were up by 300%. Danny has been arrested 7 times in the last year, he told me, and each arrest has led to about 3 days in jail. As he put it, that's 3 days that he's not making money for his family. The question of whether it's appropriate and effective to arrest and jail young men for earning their living at something that perhaps bothers a certain percentage of subway passengers is at the center of a larger debate playing out in de Blasio's New York, and a debate that's embodied by the opposing forces within his own administration. De Blasio came to power in part by vowing to improve the dynamics between the city's police and its low-income communities of color. He pledged to end the racially biased deployment of stop and frisk, the aggressive tactic of patting down anyone suspected of carrying drugs or guns. His mixed-race teenage son took on the issue in a campaign spot that went viral. And yet his first significant act as mayor was to choose as his police commissioner Braden, a man who has done more than perhaps anyone else in the world to promote quality of life, or broken windows policing, as it's sometimes called. I apologize if I'm saying what you already know, but the theory of broken windows holds that if minor crimes are allowed to go unpunished, it will create the perception that authorities have no control, that they've surrendered control over a neighborhood, emboldening serious criminals to commit serious crimes. There's little evidence to support the theory, and it's been well established that blacks and Latinos are disproportionately arrested for these minor crimes. But in the first 5 months of de Blasio's tenure, the police have arrested more people for minor infractions than they did in the first 5 months of Bloomberg's last year in office. When the group Police Reform Organizing Project conducted a survey of New York courts this spring, they found that nearly 90% of the hundreds of defendants charged with low-level offenses were people of color. The tactic remains hugely popular in New York, with some 60% of New Yorkers saying in a recent poll that they support it. And even the most progressive voices in the city council have largely remained silent on the issue. In the wake of Eric Garner's death this summer, at the hands of police who had been attempting to arrest him for selling untaxed cigarettes, de Blasio stood by Braden in supporting the use of police to respond to these quality-of-life offenses. I can understand why any New Yorker may say that's not such a big offense, he said at a press conference, but a violation of the law is a violation of the law. He explained that he'd been critical of stop and frisk not because there was something inherently wrong with the tactic, but because the police used it as a pretext for conducting unconstitutional searches of people who attracted suspicion simply because of the color of their skin and their style of dress. The nuance of this distinction didn't seem to impress some of his sometimes supporters, like the NYCLU, who are demanding wholesale reforms of broken windows policing. There are some simple things that the mayor could do to scale back quality of life policing. He could replace arrests with tickets and fines. He could order, say, the Department of Finance to take over from the NYPD when it comes to penalizing people for things like untaxed cigarettes. But with Braden at his side, it seems unlikely that he'll make that call. The conventional wisdom is that he brought in Braden to protect his right flank, to guard against the perception of him as a liberal, as a soft on crime liberal. If he were to tussle with a commissioner over something as popular as quality of life policing, he could perhaps jeopardize the other items on his progressive agenda, like universal pre-K and affordable housing. De Blasio has already taken some progressive steps in the realm of criminal justice. He hired the reformer Joseph Ponti to take over Rikers Island, and he approved a $12 million investment in a neighborhood anti-violence initiative centered on social services, an effort that Bloomberg had never supported. Even Braden impressed some progressives when he ordered a full retraining of the NYPD on the use of force after Garner's death. But for now, it seems unlikely that the mayor will take any steps to remove arrests and jail from the equation when it comes to addressing things like the sale of loose cigarettes or dancing in the subway.